Does protesting work? Does it work really? When it comes to political action, should we be studying more the realm of advertising, psychology? When it really comes to influencing human behavior, this is one of the points that I wanted to touch on here. So let's get right into the news. I got it loaded up here. This is Minnesotans shutter businesses and call off work in economic blackout day to protest ICE. This is, of course, Minnesota is where the Renee Good shooting happened. I talked about it last week. So people are out in full force, and other things have happened. There has been a 5-year-old, I believe, that they detained, and it's day after day. And I honestly don't keep up with every little thing that happens. It's not a little thing. It's there are big things that are going on, but you get the point. I did want to talk about this protest aspect. As you see, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people that are in this cold. Over here it was wind chills of negative 25 when I was outside yesterday and today. And in Minnesota, I'm guessing it's not much warmer than that. So people are out in full force, showing their outrage, right? Showing their lack of support for this system. Before I even get to reading the article, I've heard this said before that protests they make things worse. And I do have to say I agree with that. In general, the protesting like this is going to hurt the people because the people are the ones who are trying to drive down this road, right? So it is an inconveniencing of the people. I get that being inconvenienced by people who are blocking the road is not the end of the world, right? It pales in comparison to people losing their lives, right? Their children being taken away. I get that that's a bigger deal than being able to get through this one road. But there is an aspect to especially turning the majority, the silent majority, turning the people against the protesters and their cause. Protesting is coercive in nature. If you get a large enough number of people, society is going to have to accept your demands, no matter how extreme they are. See, it's just about numbers, and that determines the success of a protest. The success of a protest is not dependent on the merit of their philosophy, but by the level of disruption that they present, like how big of a problem they are. So, let's start reading this. A bit of it. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets across Minnesota on Friday, closing down businesses and calling out of work in a mass protest against the Trump administration's immigration crackdown in the state. It's called the ICE Out of Minnesota Day of Truth and Freedom demonstration. Wow. I've commented on this before. My channel is, of course, called Truth and Law. Soundpath that I was, a part of as a artist and an organizer last year was originally going to be called something like the Truth and Freedom Music Festival, because that's what it is. That's what it was. That's what it is. Before the name Soundpath, and I find it interesting that I'm seeing some of the terminology that we use in the natural law community, the alternative news community, truth and freedom, that is spilling over more to mainstream counterculture, like mainstream opposition. Because when we talk about people protesting immigration, this is now mainstream protesters, right? It's not the point to call them leftists or liberals, but it is very mainline. And I just find it interesting that into the main line you get some of this language, like even the No Kings protest that were against Donald Trump. This idea of no kings, that's no masters, no slaves. That's anarchist, principles, and you're gonna see more of that blending, which is kind of, now that I think of it, it comes back to the point of mass protests, mass level action, like mass protests, mass demonstrations, is very much a link to socialism, to revolutionary communism, right? It's more on that side. The people that are, mistreated, they're exploited, so on and so forth. They may not be a select few that has a very high philosophical viewpoint or ideology, but they definitely have a high level of action. It's mostly the youth, right? A lot of students, a lot of workers, just want to draw the symbolism. And meanwhile, you take a look at the natural law anarchist community, right? We're talking about the school of, not school, Mark Passio. I don't want to start listing too many names because there's a big overlap. But when you talk about the alternative community that is nonpartisan, right? They're anti-government, they're anti-authority, right? So let's mention, Richard Grove, Ryan Christian, Derek Bros. So let's say that. So you're gonna see a blending of that symbolism as we see here with the protesters. I want to go out into the streets as well and voice my opposition to tyranny. I have a show called This Week in Tyranny. But as soon as you get out into the streets and you're amongst those 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, you start to see how different they really are, that we're not really going in the same direction. But we do share a lot in common. See, let me skip to this. Minnesotans are coming together. This is a quote from the website of the movement. Minnesotans are coming together in moral reflection and action to stand together against the actions of the federal government against the state of Minnesota. There will be a unified statewide pause in daily economic activity. Instead, Minnesotans will spend time with family, neighbors, and their community to show Minnesota's moral heart and collective economic power. To those that know me and have or have experience, in this movement, this is pretty interesting to see. I think it's very well said. I don't even know exactly what movement I'm referring to. I guess it's the Ice Out of Minnesota, Day of Truth and Freedom. Maybe that's the website. What is the actual organization? It's iceoutnowminnesota.com. I love the word choice they're using, right? Moral reflection. They're going to show their collective economic power. I'm scared by the word collective sometimes when I hear it used, right? Because I'm always watchful against any kind of socialism. But the actions of the federal government against the state of Minnesota, I think this is well done, and I just think it's impressive. But going back to protesting, I really just wish protesting was done at the individual level, because that's the level it needs to be done on when you talk about being outraged by actions that are going on. Individuals holding other individuals accountable, instead of groups and organizations protesting against other groups and organizations, which is what always happens. Like, instead of screaming in the face of somebody you don't know and have never met before, right? Somebody with a riot shield in front of you, whoever gets called in to, as crowd control, basically. When you get in that situation, basically the outcome is predetermined then. Like, what are they really going to say? What are you really going to convince them of? There's no potential for thought or any kind of conversation or change. But when you have an individual incident, and you got one person that maybe just arrested somebody, or you're catching them walking in the street, and it's just you don't have a crowd, you're not yelling at them. In that circumstance, you actually have the chance to connect with them. Not that that's going to happen, it usually does not, but the possibilities are endless, because it's still just two human beings just having that kind of basic respect for each other before things break down into a combative scenario. And protesting, in essence, is combative. But as to the things that cause big protests, the things that cause the outrage, the big injustices, like beating up someone who's in handcuffs, or kicking a woman on the ground, or choking somebody out with the knee on their neck, pepper spraying somebody who's on the ground, like these are things that I really think examples should be made out of these people, to make the next ICE agent or cop or soldier, make the next person afraid to do something like that again. That's how things change. You have to embed it into people's memories, making human beings remember something for the rest of their life. That's impactful. That's the kind of change that the protesters want to have. Things that last. So, as to those people I mentioned, people who are like pepper spraying somebody who's unarmed. You've seen these videos, like kicking a woman while she's down, hitting her in the back of the head. I'm not really specifically referring to the stuff going on in Minnesota now, but it's just an opportunity for me to talk about it. But those kind of blatant, hideous abuses like that, I really think the response to that, the individual protests that I'm talking about, should be fire bottles, pots of boiling water, like stuff like that. Obviously, that's a different conversation. That's not the protesting conversation, and I get that. My final word on these protests before I go to the next story is a question. Which protest do you remember? What are the real memorable ones for you? Because for me, it's the Tiananmen Square man, the Chinese man, the student standing in front of the tanks, and the tanks are trying to go around him, and he's standing, he refuses to move no matter how close they get, and you have a row of 5 tanks. That's a memorable protest to me. Or the Tibetan monks self-immolating, lighting themselves on fire, and sitting there in the lotus position with their legs crossed as they're burning there. Like, those are the protests that stand out for me, that I can tell you are significant to me, other than just the last one that happened, right? Because that's usually what happens with protests. You just remember the last one, and there's going to be another one, and another one after that, and another one after that. But when it comes to actually changing things, changing minds, it's protests by individuals that are encoded in somebody's mind, in the minds and hearts of the people. Protests by groups of people, like this in Minnesota, like the No Kings protest, like the socialist protests, they work when the empire's already falling, when it's on the way out. Like was the case with Solidarity in Poland. Yes, it was... We're talking about the fall of the Soviet Empire. I'm not expecting everyone to have that background, but I'll just say real quickly that, yes, it was amazing and heroic what those people did, and it is an inspiring thing to, give the proverbial middle finger to the status quo and actually win and actually get them out of power. But please recognize that that happens at the tail end, when the regime was already at the end of its life course, at the end of its life cycle. If the empire is strong enough, which is when the injustices are egregious enough, it's where it's the most important to protest or cause change or inspire change, cause action. If they're strong, they're going to kill you if you persist, if you don't relent. They're going to kill you. But if they're not strong enough as an empire and your protest works and you actually get some change done, then what was the point of protesting in the first place? Because it was coming to an end anyway. So, in conclusion, with the protesting story in Minnesota, if you're willing to die for your principles and your ideas, which I agree with, why not do it in the one of 2 other ways that I outlined? The Tiananmen Square way or the water and fire way. Because that's going to make a difference, and I won't back down on that. I've been criticized before for my stance on that. It's pretty... I understand what I'm saying, that it's not your... I understand it's an extreme take, but I really do think that is the impact. That is the kind of actions that will have the impact that we're looking for. Now, speaking of impact, next story is these winter storm warnings. There's an ice storm. So we just talked about the ice protests. Well, there's going to be an ice storm. I was calling it a snowstorm. Then I realized a lot of people are saying ice storm. So, this thing is going to be all across the country. Really, a lot in the south. You're going to get a whole lot of snow. Here in Chicago, we're going to get maybe like 2 inches. But we have been getting extreme cold. So it's going to affect a large portion of the country. Now, why am I talking about it on This Week in Tyranny? Before, I've made the connection to geoengineering and weather modification, which, is not a conspiracy theory. It's being researched. There is a thing that's being, floated, talked about. The extent to which it's implemented would, of course, be speculation, because we don't actually know, right? We could talk about that, bring some of those documents out and those news stories out, and I've done it before. I really just want to say, can I tell you for sure that this isn't normal weather, that this is abnormal or man-made somehow? No, I can't tell you that. But what does stand out to me, and what is abnormal to me, is the level of collective mobilization. I'm seeing states of emergencies announced, things that are good. Preparation is, of course, is good, preparing for a natural disaster. But the all of the organizations coming out with their contingency plans and their warnings. There seems to be this pandemic precedent that now when something is about to happen, our response is extreme. And my friend pointed this out to me before. She said, this is just living in Chicago. It's not so cold. So many people are canceling their appointments and anticipating the cold as if it's going to be the end of the world. And it's just living in Chicago. It's not, obviously it's dangerous. You have to be ready for it, but it's not extreme if you're prepared. So when we talk about restricting trucks from traveling, which is down here, let me just scroll down to it and show you. The New York Attorney General warns of price gouging, by the way. She's given you her phone number, or her office's phone number, to report price gouging. This is what I wanted to show you, that starting midnight on Sunday, trucks, empty straight CDL weighted trucks are going to be prohibited from being on these highways. No passenger vehicles pulling trailers, motorcycles will be restricted. Now, generally, is that a good idea? I think it is. I think it's generally a good idea. But the fact that it's the official state Department of Transportation doing it, it alarms me. This is more interference into the free market, into the economy, which I really glossed over. I didn't even talk about it. When we talk about the ICE protest, they talk about an economic blackout. Well, does an economic blackout do anything to the federal government? I don't really think it does. I think it does something to the people's free market economy first, right? We're talking about the effectiveness of industry, the viability of businesses to conduct their operations. This is stuff that affects us, our economic power at the end of the day, right? Our collective economic power. So this makes me raise an eyebrow with the ice storm and the responses to it, and with the way that, with the precedent of what happened during the pandemic, now it's so common to just shut down travel. I wouldn't be surprised if they shut down the highways because of an ice storm, right? That is the kind of precedent we're setting. And when we're talking about a descent into a world where our individual rights are disappearing, these are the kind of landmarks, mile post, so to speak, that you would see on that highway to hell, proverbially, right? So it's not to prove causality. It's just to show you that what I'm seeing is definitely alarming. But I thought about this. Let me actually scroll up. I wanted to show you the United States map of what this storm looks like. Of course, projected storm, right? I suppose I won't be able to see exactly what I wanted. What it was just like the map is behind me, a photo of the continental United States, and you saw a straight line. You saw a straight line where the ice is all cutting across, and I was thinking, straight lines usually don't occur in nature, right? So there's my little investigation, like, oh, is this a typical pattern for one of these snowstorms or ice storms? Are ice storms even common? Is there a historical base for them? Because honestly, I don't know. When I was in my teens and early 20s, I didn't care about the weather, so I couldn't really notice if there was an ice storm because I didn't care. I didn't have a stable job to go to. But anyway, as you can see here, 25th anniversary of the devastating 1998 ice storm. These things have happened before, and there is a precedent for them, right? Maybe even that general pattern from roughly Texas up to New York and kind of a northeast to southwest diagonal line. That jumped out to me. So it has happened before, so it's nothing new, right? It's nothing new or special, like the negative 25-degree wind chill in Chicago. But our responses, see, the people's response, and this is when it clicked in my head, and I wanted to share this thought that I've had with you, is isn't that the underlying wind, so to speak, that lifts tyranny? Isn't that what fuels tyranny? Extreme human responses to natural pressures and problems. Natural problems that you're going to have conflicts with neighbors, you're going to have national identities, you're going to have differences of beliefs, all more or less natural differences that we can deal with, natural pressures, right? Lack of resources, pressures like that. They can all be dealt with, but when we get extreme collective human response, mobilizing into a single unit, right, to do something extreme for the greater good, to avert the worst case scenario, that's when we see things like invasions, wars, famines, all these government interventions that I lamented, that I've talked about, and all the historical examples of it. That's what it is. They're extreme responses to normal, natural, sometimes extreme, but natural human processes. Next story. The speaking of natural pressures and human responses, the WHO, the World Health Organizations. Well, the United States is officially out of it now. This is the article. Is the U.S. officially out of the WHO? Of course, a year ago, President Donald Trump, he gave notice that the U.S. would withdraw from the WHO, right? But if there's not really a precedent with the WHO's charter, it doesn't contain a clause allowing member states to withdraw. It's kind of like a gang, you know. Once you're in the gang, once you're initiated, you're part of the gang. There's no such thing as resigning from the gang, right? But anyway, now it's official, and there's this article that if you want to look into it more, I'll actually link these. I know sometimes I neglected to do that. So, with the U.S. exiting the WHO, when we're talking about health as a greater issue, right? And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being one of these figures that come in to try to solve the health issue, right? Politicizing an issue, it ensures that it never gets solved. So if you want to make sure that something never gets fixed, make it political and make two sides. I talked about this last week. When we talk about health, you have the health community leaders, which is the scientists, the doctors, the nurses, the biologists, everyone who works in health, everybody who is a professional or expert in it, right? They're part of a single community, a mainstream health / science, so to speak. They're about advancing technology and implementing practices to remove the imperfections of nature. So, sterilizing things, technology, medicines, what we call allopathic, right? This is the general direction, right? Goes all the way back down to Pasteur and before that, Now, the alternative health community is not new either. It also goes back a long way. But it's basically just everyone that disagrees with the status quo leaders of the health community. It's people who have other ideas about health. That's all it is. And they're all about optimizing living within nature and removing all the man-made imperfections from the environment. So, generally, being in tune with nature, being in sync with that, and having a homeostasis there, right? And taking out all the toxins, all the chemicals, all of the unhealthy man-made things, radiation, things like that. That is what they're concerned with. Well, call me crazy, but I think they're both valuable, those camps. I don't discount either one of them. And just like there's a wave-particle duality to physics, I think there's a germ theory and terrain theory duality to illness. I know a lot of us in the freedom community are really terrain theory heavy, down to 100%. And I'm not. I'm not there. So call me crazy again. But when it comes to how to fix health problems, I start with I hold the alternative as my base. So I'm alternative health to start out with. I'm about living within nature, to be well adjusted to nature to begin with, right? I'm not worried too much about getting sick if I do A, B, and C. I'm not worried about getting all these scans and tests done to see if I'm going to be healthy, right? I don't put my health in the hands of somebody else, right? That's my starting point. But I supplement that with man-made interventions when necessary. So I'm willing to take medication if necessary. I was willing to take surgeries with and without my knowledge or consent, of course, because I have had life-saving surgery. And so, I'm not anti-medicine. I'm just not. And I believe that obviously technologies have already improved health, and they can continue to. So I'm not a doomer in that sense. But people, they bought Robert F. Kennedy and Make America Healthy Again. And it's not just in the United States, but let's really use that as the example, because this is the reason that the U.S. withdrew from the WHO. It's just public pressure, and it's just something that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump and their government do to try to, they do it performatively. It's strictly performative. So we were supposed to get the non-vaccine, non-GMO, alternative health presidency. But has that happened? Of course not. Of course it hasn't happened. And this is supposed to make it look like something is happening. When the entire global health community is not going to change their professional practices just because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got a bill through and Donald Trump signed it. Even if they make a proclamation that the WHO directives are not going to be, their programs are not going to be formally implemented, nothing will change. It's just like with the protests. Except with this, even guerrilla warfare doesn't work, right? If you want to change the entire direction of an entire scientific community, you got to present new ideas, or you got to present old ideas in a new way. You got to present the right information in a way that compels people to act on it, the way advertisements compel people to act on it, an impulse, an urge, or a craving, right? And the way that inspiring ideas hit you when you first hear them. That is what we need to do to really get people to change. We, just like the protesters, we can't alienate the scientists, right? So, even if a dead clock is right twice a day and RFK Jr. passes something, he makes a proclamation that is great, or he passes a bill that bans pesticides, that would be great if we could hold to it, but we're not going to. And you can't get enough time in the White House to make those kind of changes stick. Remember, you're up against an entire multidisciplinarian group where the powerful people and influences in thought and ideas and academia. You're trying to influence them. You're trying to influence businesses that have boards of directors, and they are hiring 8-figure consultants to figure out what the best way to progress is. And you think that somebody in a suit talking into a camera all day is going to change it for you. Ridiculous. Okay, as we're more than halfway through it, seems like I'm going to have an hour-long show. That would be great. This next story, kind of lightening the mood here. The feds arrest fugitive Olympic snowboarder accused of becoming a drug lord in Mexico. I suppose that's not that funny, right? People, the problem of drug addiction and what addiction does to families is not funny, nor is a man losing his freedom, right? But the reason I laugh is because this face, when you see him right now, I know this face. You got people treating you like El Chapo and arresting you, and you get the cameras in front of there and they take your mugshot, and you could really care less, right? Because you could care less about what they do to you. This is the face of a man who is just accepting his fate. Of course, I guess I've been in his shoes at some point, on a much smaller scale. But that's the thing. We're so enamored with the drug lord, the drug kingpin, and gangsters in general. It's a very compelling thing, right? This is like the Johnny Depp trial. For some reason, it just speaks to us, and it spoke to me, and I became a little small-time drug dealer, just like this guy became a big-time drug dealer. But it takes you to ultimately to the same place. But when it comes to Ryan Wedding is his name, right? He is a former Olympic snowboarder who became a drug kingpin at some point somehow. He's now arrested and taken down. As you see, the FBI taking him out of the airplane. Every now and then a scapegoat gets put in front of us. The people get a scapegoat shown to us. And it's not to say that he's a good person. It's not to say that he's a bad person. I'm just trying to say that to get in any powerful position in any criminal business, anything whether it's drugs, whether it's child trafficking, anything, you had to get help from the authorities at some point. You had to get state sponsorship at some level. Somebody had to either look the other way or take out your competitors, and this has been, there are so many examples of this happening. Connections with the CIA, right? What is the abbreviation? Criminals in Action, right? The DEA, the ATF. There is no El Chapo without those organizations. So that happens for any number of reasons. Whatever the motivations of the state was to empower certain drug kingpins and make them who they are in the black market criminal underworld, that it happens. And at some point the authorities take them down, and for any number of reasons. I'm not claiming to know what it is. I just want to highlight that organized crime is on both sides, both the light side and the dark side. It's still organized crime, whether it's within the FBI organization or within those cartels and all those organizations that they're supposed to be fighting. They're really not. But it's a fascination, and the idea of a drug lord, it fascinates us as a society. So, I'll mention that just to make that point. Now, this is really the last story we're going to talk about. J.D. Vance has made some waves. Sorry for this box over here. It looks like I won't be able. No, that's okay. So, J.D. Vance has made some statements about abortion. Right? It was about Donald Trump's record about being a pro-life president, and I think it's an official White House publication that Donald Trump is now the most pro-life president ever. So, J.D. Vance has made those statements in a speech or a rally. He said that Americans won't find purpose in a cubicle, but instead as parents through the creation of human life. He said, you will find great meaning if you dedicate yourself to the creation and sustenance of human life. The vice president and his wife Usha announced earlier this week that they are expecting their fourth child, a boy. And I thought this was interesting what he said, because the things that he said I 100% agree with. Totally agree with it. And it's the sentiment that we have gotten away from family and nature, and instead we're living in a separated, disconnected, unfulfilling, a brutal, harsh world where men and women don't respect each other or they don't excite each other anymore. Totally agree. They've got the actual quote here I want to show you. To our fellow Americans, we say you're never going to find great meaning in a cubicle or in front of a computer screen. But you will find great meaning if you dedicate yourself to the creation and sustenance of daily life, of human life. That's a Freudian slip, right? So before I get into it, I don't know if you know this, right? I am completely pro-life in every way. Completely pro-life. I'm completely against abortion when it comes to in its concept, in its sentiment. But I am against criminalizing abortion. I don't want the government to make abortions legal as a practice. Because this woman is going to have a child. She's the only one who can give birth to the child. She's the only one who can nurse that child. In the beginning, I know that, of course, it's two people that come together to create that life. I know, but who other than her is going to do it? So I'm not gonna go and telling her how she has to have her child. And it's just like, if she doesn't want to be a mother, what kind of a childhood do you expect that child to have? And I know that it can, of course, change, right? And mom can, and there are so many examples of people who were going to have abortions and they didn't, and they say that it's a miracle that changed their life. They're so happy that they never had an abortion. There's the children that grow up to be adults, and their life, they never would have been alive if it wasn't for that woman not having an abortion. I get it. I get all that. But this is what we do to children, right? We're like, can I pierce my ear like this, completely drill a hole through my ear? No, you can't get your ear pierced, because you're going to regret it later and you're not going to be able to go back and change it. This is what we do to children. We're not supposed to do this to adults. And at the end of the day, we're not really responsible for each other. Nobody. The bottom line is, I'm really cautious about telling women what to do with their bodies, seriously. So, even in my word choice and rhetoric, you could see I'm leaning towards the left in that way, but I'm not a leftist. I'm pro-life. Like, I don't agree with anything about it, but I just wouldn't make it illegal. You have to let them do it. Like, this is a deeper issue. The issue is that she doesn't want to become a mother in the first place. Like, that's the issue we need to address. But see, right-wing politicians, they put on the pro-life robe, not for the principles of human life, but to tell women what to do, and they do that. Just like the Christians, who are so concerned about premarital sex and how many sexual partners a woman has. And it's not just Christians, right? Because Muslims are way more into this. But the reason I say the Christians is because this is what every U.S. politician that puts on that robe, and they're very pro-life all of a sudden. Guys like Reagan and these are very holy, right? And you see a guy like Donald Trump is gonna say, "God bless America." What is that? When has Donald Trump ever gave the indication of believing in the Most High, believing in His commandments? I mean, come on. So, just like those, super holy Christians they're really serious about a woman not being free with her sexuality. It's like, right idea, wrong behavior, wrong rhetoric. Same thing with me and JD Vance here. We agree on this sentiment of the precious nature of human life. We agree on that sentiment because, it's only a sentiment that we can agree on. It's only a general principle. Because when you talk about respect for human life, look at what ICE is doing in the streets. Look at what they're doing, blowing up the boats, right, in the Caribbean Sea, and of course the stance on Israel and Palestine, and so that's obvious there, right? You can say one thing and it sounds great, but that doesn't mean me and JD Vance have anything in common other than that. Sometimes you have the punchline in common with somebody, but you're going in complete different directions. And that's you, JD Vance. That's you. That was you, Bush. That was you, Reagan. You were just like those. You're just somebody that puts on a robe and tries to tell people what to do with their lives. Especially women. That type of a thing pushed women into the cubicles and into the radical feminism and all the trans nonsense that's going on today. These type of right-wing politicians is who did it. The whole reason that people went to the extremes and went to the anti-marriage way of life was because they were being told what to do. The hippie generation, it's because they were being held down. They were being told what to do. There's always got to be a status quo that's suppressing them. And the politicians, every now and then, every few years, they put on that robe. And then what happens is the wolf in sheep's clothing welcomes them in on the other side. The left welcomes them in. We're going to change all this. We're going to change all the oppressive laws. We're going to make people more free. But what happens? They end up making lifetime patients out of the kids that have gender dysphoria, right? They're going in and mixing together all the dressing rooms and the bathrooms when that was never the issue. That's your wolf in sheep's clothing. That's what happens. and it's all by design. So I'm not trying to say that this is some kind of evil mastermind. It's all by design. These are all, obviously it's by design. Obviously it's wrestling dynamics of a heel and a baby face, of the bad guy being so evil, and then because he's so evil and out of bounds, that this guy comes in, and even if he's wearing a damn green cape like Shane Hurricane Helms, and he's a little skinny guy who's kind of goofy for a wrestler, but with the right bad guy, he can be believable and he can get the people's support. Like, it's just wrestling dynamics. Obviously, they're actors. Obviously, J.D. Vance and Trump and Milei and Macron, actors. Carney, Putin and Zelensky, obviously they're all actors. The games stay the same, only the name changes. Changes only the name. Something like that. I'm going to put it in my next song. Only the name changes, the game stays the same, And those are all of my news stories on this quick little run through the news. But we're going to close with this picture. Kind of going full circle, right? This is the picture of tyranny today. It is the federal enforcement of nonviolent crime that was in Chicago, was in other cities, now it's in Minnesota. Now this is actually deriving from another story, because Governor Newsom of California, Gavin Newsom, he pointed out that you see Bavino here in the middle, that he is dressing like a Nazi officer. He's donning the Nazi look, okay? The trench coat, the very, all it is a nice coat. It's a nice men's coat. It's just good. He's just well dressed. He's dressed like somebody. But of course, this is what the SS officer is dressed like. This is a Nazi look. This is what Gavin Newsom said. Ironically, he said at the World Economic Forum. So I think it's all ironic, considering Newsom's behavior, especially during the pandemic and what he was trying to do to people. And he does it at the World Economic Forum, right? These global think tanks, they are the modern day Nazis. They're the modern day League of Nations. So it's ironic, but I agree with him when it comes to this look. I agree that this trench coat jacket is a Nazi look, and just for wearing that, it does. And it's not just him; it's these guys who are wearing full black. They've got their guns. I don't know if this is a paintball gun over here on the left, but they're wearing their balaclavas. They're wearing their gas masks. They're wearing their helmets with full protective shields. Like, they are so equipped. This is how equipped you get to go to clean out human feces from the sewers, like to go into deadly chemical removal, asbestos removal, like to the exterminators. Oh, here, I just noticed this. I believe this is an LRAD. I believe that's a sound cannon or something like that. That this square thing that is mounted is some kind of a crowd control thing, whether it causes nausea or it causes hearing damage through the loud noise, or something else, or it's a water cannon. Probably not, because of how cold it is. These are things this is a look you put on to deal with pests, but they're putting that look on to go deal with human beings. And that is both infuriating, partially. It does get on my nerves that this guy dresses like that. Yes, the Nazi comparison is there. But also it's just partially sad, because these are agents of the state, and obviously being a natural law based anarchist, I talk about doing away with the state's institutions, but these are not the state agents like the first responders. These are not first responders like the police, the firefighters, the paramedics, who I have respect for. These are the other kinds of state agents. These are the weak, the little men, the ones who are quick to act and slow to think. The group thinkers, right? The nameless gray faces. The broken minds, little immature sad units, right? These are the most dangerous kind of people. These are the people that will actually hurt you. They'll push any button, any trigger, because they're very small inside. And they go home after this kind of a work day and somehow are husbands and parents. And I don't actually understand how. I don't know how. I don't even know how they can get an erection. Obviously, I don't. They're so soft. but they can. They can. That's the reality. And they are having children, and they are living among us in society. And that's because nature distributes its gifts and makes them available to all of us, all and any of us. It distributes its gifts to all. And it also distributes its punishments to all. That is my closing message. The point of all this, just remember, it's your individual choice that matters. Nature is not going to solve our problems that we cause. It's not going to solve it automatically. It's going to let people like this make a living. It's going to let a guy like Bovino put on a Nazi jacket. It doesn't go away just because it's abhorrent and it's an injustice, and just because we know how crazy it is that Donald Trump can go to Davos and say what he says, and everybody's like, I can't believe this is real. Well, you let it happen. We have to make an impression on the world. Who we are. Who are you? Who are you? Who you support, who you stand for, right? Who you vote for, so to speak, And it comes down to nature is going to put us all together. It's up to you what you reward and what you punish. This episode has been all about rewards and punishments. And consider that when we talk about protests and mass civil disobedience, right? Actual action to change all of the injustice in the world. It's about what kind of behavior, what kind of ideas you reward, and what kind of behavior you punish. And that's not to say that I'm advocating for putting our hands on other people, but it's about what you do with your time. Like, what kind of impression are you making on the world? That is a message I'm echoing at this microphone and this screen, and it's bouncing right at me, because I got to practice what I preach, and that's it. That was episode 164 of This Week in Tyranny. We are going strong. It doesn't look like there is an end in sight. It's January 24th, 2026. Saturday edition. I managed to get my things done. I've been kind of behind schedule, but I'm catching up, trying to look for the funnel. I'll be giving a quick presentation at the Funnel 5 conference. I should put a link to that. It's Freedom Under Natural Law 5 Igniting Action. There's a lot like the sentiment of this episode. I almost did an episode about the YouTube algorithm, because I was looking up stuff about how to grow my channel and kind of be better with my with the kind of reach that I get, because at the end of the day it is about reaching people, right? And just making my content better and shit like that. And then I saw all these things about how to do it, and it's just like, be consistent, make the same kind of a video, drop it at the same time, you gotta make the thumbnails, and I had a whole thing ready about how the YouTube algorithm, specifically YouTube, what it promotes is indicative of the decline of our society. Like, what kind of behavior is rewarded and why, and talking more about the what kind of values and principles that we're exalting and what kind we're suppressing, and that overlaps with groupthink and collectivism versus individuality and all this stuff. I'm glad I didn't do it, because I think that this news show is a good little break, and maybe I'll do that again next week. So next week is my birthday edition. I'm going to be 30 on February 2nd. Kind of crazy. And more coming soon from me. I've kind of gotten locked into just doing my show, and I never really do stuff like this. I feel like people on the internet that know me may actually be interested in like hearing what's going on in my life, so I threw it in at the end. Thank you to all the thank you for the chat GPT and other suggestions, that if you're gonna throw something like this and you'd put it at the end. For those who are still listening, you put in your little hook, your little punchy intro at the beginning. So as much as I roll my eyes at what it takes to get some respect out here as as a thinker and as a speaker. I ain't gonna try to beat my head against the wall. Of course, I'm gonna go with the flow, which is what we need to do. Yeah. And the environment will reward our behavior, and sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone, and the world is not going to change just because you wake up in the morning and think things should be a different way. Right? We're not separate from each other, and as much as it's all about individuality and really walking to the beat of your own drum. I fully believe in that, but you're not going to get it without the support of others. You're not going to get it without being approachable. You're not going to get it without having an ability to compel others. So it's not about putting on masks, but it is about putting on that robe, right? That trench coat. You got to put on that trench coat sometimes and walk amongst the people, It's a joke. Yeah, the world it's kind of crazy. But look forward to more different kinds of content. I don't just want to get locked into doing This Week in Tyranny. I'm going to be doing other things. Yeah, and I'll be making some shorts while I'm at it. So thank you so much. I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.